TheAnswer.com, on the AM560 mobile app, on your Alexa-powered smart speaker, and on TuneIn, iHeart, and on Odyssey. This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM560. The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. National Security spokesman John Kirby was on Fox News Sunday yesterday talking about a number of things, including the big meet today between two dictators, Xi of China, Putin of Russia, and addressing the Ruskies taking out of a U.S. drone. Here's what Kirby had to say about all this.
There's no question that both China and Russia, and this is right out in the national security strategy, are two countries that are chafing against this international rules-based order that the United States and so many of our allies and partners have built up since the end of World War II. They don't like that. They'd like to rewrite the rules of the game globally, and they have been increasing their cooperation and their relationship, certainly of late. China has not condemned Putin's invasion of Ukraine. They are still buying Russian oil and energy resources, and they have at least given tacit approval because they've taken the Russian claim that this is somehow an existential threat against Russia, that the war is the West's fault. Mm-hmm. So we'll watch what comes out of this meeting here Monday through Wednesday of President Xi to Moscow, the state visit, if you will. But what we have said before, and we'll say it again today, that if coming out of this meeting, there's some sort of call for a ceasefire. Well, that's just going to be unacceptable because all that's going to do, Mike, is ratify Russia's conquest to date. All that's going to do is give Mr. Putin more time to refit, retrain, reman, and try to plan for renewed offensives at a time of his choosing.
One more point here on China specifically, their military buildup. And there's a good piece in the Journal last week about how the Chinese communists essentially took over control of the South China Sea right under our noses. Are we meeting the moment with our defense budget, with the kind of threats posed by our chief adversaries, starting with the Chinese communists? Here's what Kirby said to that question.
The United States is going to maintain the most preeminent military capability around the world. We're dedicated to that. You can look at the budget that we just laid out there and see how much of that budget is dedicated to the kinds of threats and challenges that our own national defense strategy says we need. Mm-hmm. And that includes the kinds of challenges that are posed in the Indo-Pacific from China, certainly, but also from North Korea and, quite frankly, from Russia. So it's all there in the budget. It's very comprehensive. We obviously are going to look forward to communicating this budget on Capitol Hill in coming days and weeks. But we believe that this defense budget will do a lot to help keep America's military capability the most prominent in the world.
Does it? For an answer to that question, we're pleased to be joined by Lieutenant Colonel Jim Carafano, VP of the Catherine and Shelby Cullum Davis Institute for International Studies at the Heritage Foundation and author of Brutal War, Jungle Fighting in Papua New Guinea, 1942. Does it, Jim, or is the defense budget that the Biden administration put together, is it preparing us to meet the day with respect to the Chinese communists?
I swear to God, sometimes I think you just play these clips to enrage me.
Exactly, I do.
Well, so two things. First of all, I am so sick of officials and people who purport to be smart talking about China and Russia are threatening the rules-based order, as if there is a rules-based
right.
order. There is not. There are countries that protect their interests, and countries, and the notion that somehow the problem is people just aren't following the rules. Look, the only reason why anybody behaved post-World War II was because the United States was the greatest power in the world, and people were forced to respect that. It wasn't because of motions that were made at the UN. So somehow that we're fighting to get back to something, whether it's nonsense. Countries that protect their interests survive and thrive, and the ones that don't. And this notion that we're fighting for some kind of universal, rule set that everybody's going to follow. Anybody in Chicago knows you can pass all the rules and laws and everything you want, but if you can't enforce them, it's nonsense. So that statement is quite honestly infuriating. And the argument that somehow this administration has their eye on the ball of defeating China is laughable. The Secretary of the Navy just came out and said the most important mission of the Department of Defense is climate change.
Oh my God.
So square that with this notion that we're taking on China.
Yeah, and the Air Force, I noted earlier in the show, the Air Force is all hands on deck looking for a DIE administrator to pay $185,000 to do the diversity, inclusion, equity business at the Air Force Academy. So that's where they're focused. So we got all our bases covered, DIE and climate change.
Right. So you would think if we are laser focused on deterring China, that every nickel in the Pentagon would go to that mission and to all the related tasks to go to that, and there would not be a cent left over for basically a pet political agenda on the part of the President of the United States. But oh no, those things get funded first.
And it makes America look weak. I mean, we don't look weak. We are weak. If we're directing our resources and our time and our efforts to that instead of fighting wars or preparing for possible war, then we look like the loser.
Laughable. And I think, the issue that is most frustrating really kind of is the balance of naval power in the Pacific, which is the real bullet. And the reality is I don't care how much money you spend, we can't build ships any faster. So we need to do things significantly differently. If we made for example, this administration was serious about stuff. We made a multiple-year commitment to shipbuilding. Well, then companies would go, hey, there's money coming in for the next, 10, 15 years. I'll go out, I'll build infrastructure, I'll hire people, I'll do stuff, I'll be all set. But when you have to sit around every year to find out, we're going to continue to build a ship that we partially funded the year before, that's what drives nonsense like this. And the one thing this administration has not done is get really, really serious about defense planning. Their national security audit was a complete and utter joke and was laughed out of the room. And so to go back to say, well, it's all in our strategy, well, that's just terrifying.
Also, speaking of strategies, the CHICOM strategy recently has included doing some things that should be additionally concerning, like bringing Saudi Arabia and Iran into a closer relationship, diffusing some of the tension between those two so they can all join together and gang up on the West. Well,
this is the interesting thing about Chinese foreign policy. It's very entrepreneurial, innovative, flexible, adaptive. It's basically throw the spaghetti at the wall. Try something. If it works, great. If it doesn't. Personally, I think the Iran-Saudi thing is laughable. That's going to burn up in about 35 seconds. So you would say, well, why did the Saudis sign up for this when they know it's going to implode before it even gets off the ground? And the answer is that they're sending a very powerful message to the United States of America. You guys are asleep at the freaking wheel. You came into office, and your number one enemy was us. You wanted to destroy the regime of Saudi Arabia because you don't think we meet your, we are good enough for you. And you're facing enemies like Iran and China. And you're telling us we're the problem? So, I think that's very clear what that's all about.
The telegraphing by Kirby that the meeting between Putin and Xi today will produce some sort of joint call for a ceasefire, again for sort of international posturing purposes. Do you anticipate that? And is Kirby right when he suggests our response should be to ignore any such calls?
Well, look, I don't think the Russians are really serious about a ceasefire. I'll tell you what, I was just in India for over a week, and they had the Russian A-team there, and these guys were not talking about ceasefires. They were not at all. So I do think that the whole China-Russia, the Chinese call for peace thing is just typical kind of, again, China looking for a way to posture to make it look like we're the good guys here. I don't think it's serious.
Another matter, this south of the border in Mexico, and it doesn't deal with border security. It deals with a seizure by the Mexican government of a facility of an American company. In fact, the largest producer of construction aggregates in the United States, Vulcan Materials. They seized their plant, the federal government in Mexico did, down Playa del Carmen way, to allow for the Mexican state-sponsored construction aggregates company to receive some materials after their relationship with Vulcan Materials deteriorated such they didn't have access to this port. And they're maintaining control over this Vulcan Materials outpost in Mexico. We've got actually a Vulcan Materials on quarry here in McCook. But what is the Biden administration doing with our friend, in quotation marks, AMLO, when it comes to seizing American assets in their country? The CEO has said basically, give us our land, give us our private property back, but not getting anywhere with the Mexican government.
Well, I mean, it's consistent with all of other AMLO's things, which is to really just kind of spit in the face of this administration. If you remember correctly, when people started complaining about the fentanyl, you said, "Well, that's your problem. You need to hug your families out, right?" So,
right, that's what he said.
Yeah, I just had a off the record, not for attribution conversation with a person I can't name from a department I can't name, in an administration that was right before this one, who is one of the chief negotiators with the Mexicans, and he goes, we had some super difficult, and then they would come back to us later and say, thank you. If you guys didn't push us, we did things that were really to our benefit, but we couldn't say that publicly. This administration doesn't do that. This administration hasn't had hard, tough conversations with Mexicans. And as a result, they're just looking for ways to push them around. And I don't mean to be this ungenerous or unkind or sound partisan or anything else, but you got to believe that whether it's in Mexico City or Pyongyang or Tehran or Moscow or Beijing, these guys wake up in the morning and they go, how can we put another one over sleepy Joe Biden?
Now, what do you make of Putin's visit to Ukraine yesterday?
Yeah, look, it's interesting. It's a lot of posturing, with the Chinese visit and going to this and everything else, which is just kind of incredibly divorced from the reality on the ground. I mean, the reality on the ground is the war has not gone well for the Russians. They had a massive offensive, which had tens of thousands of casualties, which produced virtually nothing. And they're terrified that the Ukrainians are going to actually launch a counteroffensive. And so this kind of posturing in the occupied territory and bringing in G and saying, oh, we want peace and all this other stuff. These are a tale of two different wars. And I do believe that Putin is still, riveted to the idea that the West will crack and they'll stop supporting the Ukrainians, and we'll just walk over this. But I got to tell you, particularly for all the people who say, well, the Europeans need to step up and do more and everything else. We're on the verge of the Europeans actually coming up with a manufacturing production deal on artillery, which is the most important munition right now in the war, not only to resupply the Ukrainians, but to rearm, all of the Europeans as well. This is exactly the opposite of the kinds of things Putin thinks he's going to get by just to keep pushing on this door.
On the domestic front, how destabilizing will it be to the political system in this country if we have a former president under arrest in New York and the current president facing articles of impeachment by perhaps the fall?
Well, I got to tell you, I think we have the most resistant political system in the world.
What?
I'm not sure there are any countries that could weather that kind of shockwaves, but I think this system can. I have more faith in Americans than Americans have in Americans.
Well, I agree with that, but do you think about this from a national security perspective in terms of implications?
Well, I mean, this is the problem, and I do this all the time. You always put yourself in the frame of the other guy, right? And say, how can I? And this is the problem with waking up and saying, how can I put one over in America? Mm-hmm. We look at the division in the political leadership and the partisanship and the ineptness of the people. You were talking before about how China walked in and essentially took over the South China Seas. Do you know when that happened? That happened when everybody that's currently in government was in government.
Right.
So the guys that just got hammered on the South China Seas are the people that are all elected and back in government now. So, on the one hand, these guys are thinking, how can we pull one over on these guys? On the other hand, they see the incredible power and resilience of the American people who, we've done screwed up stuff too, but the Taliban were in Afghanistan and we invaded the country when nobody said, and we drove them out.
Now they're back.
Yeah.
So, they're back, but look, we're not perfect, but we are a force to be reckoned with. And so people want to take advantage of us, but they also don't want to get crushed.
He is Lieutenant Colonel Jim Carafano of the Heritage Foundation. Jim, thanks as always. Appreciate it.
All right, thanks for having me.
Thank you, and he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
This is Chicago's Morning Answer.
Your show keeps me alive during the week. There's nobody I'd rather listen to between 5 and 9 in the morning than you guys.
On AM 560, The Answer.
Relief Factor, pain relief that's natural, pain relief that works, and pain relief that attacks the source of the pain. That's the experience of tens of thousands of Americans who are taking Relief Factor right now. See their incredible video endorsements at relieffactor.com and then order your 3-week quick starter pack for just $19.95. That's less than $1 a day. Find out if it can work for you like it works for me by ordering your 3-week quick starter pack today. Relieffactor.com, relieffactor.com. Be the next success story.
My brother-in-law died suddenly, and now my sister and her kids have to sell their home. I knew we could not put off getting life insurance. An agent offered us a 10-year, $500,000 policy for nearly $40 a month. SelectQuote found us identical coverage for only $18 a month.
Call SelectQuote at 1-800-940-6161 or go to SelectQuote.com now. That's 1-800-940-6161. Full details on example policies at SelectQuote.com/commercials.
March is National Nutrition Month, conveniently right after the holidays and Valentine's Day. We're past the sweet season and into the spring season, a perfect time to kick the bad habits to the curb and kickstart healthy new ones. And there's no better way to do that than with my friends at 120 Life, a natural juice drink made of pomegranates, tart cherries, and cranberries that helps lower blood pressure without the side effects of pills. I'm drinking it, and I love it. You will too. But even if you don't have high blood pressure, it's important to get your blood pressure checked. It affects almost half of all adults and can lead to serious health consequences if left untreated. That's why it's important to nip it in the bud. So go to 120life.com. That's 120life.com. And order their 2-week trial pack. If you don't see lower BP numbers, you get